Welcome everybody to the Armchair Racers podcast, episode 4. I am your host, Kenny Kibbe, in NG Kibbs, along with my co-host, Austin Belkey. We are the Armchair Racers, and let's get straight into it. Not a whole lot of news this week. A little bit of silly season action, and while didn't the F1 season literally just end? Like what? Less than an hour ago, Austin.
Minutes ago.
So we are your one-stop shop for the last or the quick news as soon as the F1 races ended. Um, but anyways, let's get into it. We got first in our real racing news section, we have Riley Herbst was announced officially. It was officially official this week to the 98 car in Xfinity next year with Stewart Haas Racing, and I didn't think he did a fantastic job in the 18. Granted, he didn't have practice for most of the year with being a rookie. That was probably pretty tough. But I was a little hopeful to see maybe somebody else get that ride. But I guess we'll see what Riley Herbst does in that car. What do you think about that move, Austin?
You have to fill the seat so I can understand why they did it. He didn't really impress me much last season, but again, I feel like it's a lack of practicing. He's kind of practicing on the fly, so you can't really afford to do much or get the car to your liking in practice, especially versus a lot of the guys who did well in that series. Um, it wasn't their rookie year.
Yeah, so I guess in a lot of it'll be a lot of no practice this year too. So it's gonna be interesting for rookies. With the fact that maybe for the foreseeable future we won't get any practice. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how the guys like him and any other young guys that are rookies how they perform.
I mean, I can't imagine they'll just get rid of practice altogether. I feel like it'll be you show up on like a Friday night and you practice for an hour, but then that's it. I think they need practice, and I think we'd be a joke of a sport if we didn't practice at all. I mean, we practice for 20 minutes before our bootleg races, so give the guys 20 minutes to go out there and have at it for a little while.
Yeah, I think it's just gonna boil down to whenever this pandemic ends and all that stuff.
In terms of F1 news, Lewis Hamilton was back this weekend. He got over COVID for the most part, so George is back in his shitty Williams at the back of the grid. Um, the Yas Marina race just got over. Verstappen won, followed by Bottas and Hamilton, and McLaren took home third in the constructor standings.
Yeah, was it a pretty boring race the very end there, the last race
It
of the
was
season?
like the whole race was pretty boring. Very few people moved around or passed people or got past people. It's just a product of the track. Not many people like the track. It's okay, but the package is just, you know, when you get to it within a couple seconds of people, even Lewis Hamilton said at the end of the race, you kind of can't pass anybody because the cars are so aero dependent and there's no ground effect aero to eat up more air.
Yeah, I'm glad I watched last week with who was it? Perez won, right?
Yes, sir.
That was a interesting race, but I don't know. I don't lose sleep over not over missing the F1 races. They just haven't been very exciting.
Yeah, you probably watched the only race all season that was super exciting and even the middle of it wasn't very exciting. It only got exciting towards like the last like 30 laps or something. Otherwise, it was pretty plain.
I guess this week we also have some next gen NASCAR testing at Daytona, which will be interesting. I guess Chris Buescher is going to be testing the next gen car at Daytona by himself, for at least that we know of, right?
Yeah, it's just him and it's at the super speedway.
Right. Yeah, we have to clarify that nowadays because they run on the road course now. Um, yeah, I'm really interested in seeing that next gen car doing testing with like a group of cars, maybe like four or more or something. That's when I'm gonna really, or when my ears are really gonna start perking up, is what this car is like in a pack.
Yeah, I know Martin Truex Jr. and Kurt Busch were kind of racing each other around the Charlotte Oval. And that was cool to see, and it sounded like they had a good time. So they should be pretty racy.
I'm wondering too what kind of speeds they're gonna be making these cars go. I assume they're probably gonna aim for around 190 to 200 around the super speedways, kind of like what they do now.
Yeah, most likely. I think any faster and you risk people getting hurt, and there's kind of no need to go above like buck 80.
To be honest, I'm kind of surprised that the cars go as fast as they do at Daytona and Talladega now. You know, they're easily pushing in the 190s, sometimes 200 in the pack, and I mean, we've seen some pretty nasty wrecks over the past few years, and they wreck a lot anymore in those kinds of races with all the blocking and whatnot that goes on and the huge runs that cars get. It's exciting racing, but a lot of really bad wrecks have been happening, and you know, and now they're going faster than they've gone in a long time.
We have, but personally, when the broadcasters say, he hit the wall going 180 miles an hour, it's not like he was perpendicular to the wall. Like he'll hit the wall and it's a glancing blow by all accounts, unless it's like somebody hits an inside wall like Kyle Busch did in 2015. So I can see why you'd want to slow down the cars. Personally, I think we probably should think about it, but
And last but not least, um, the speaking of the Cup cars, they're going to be running at Circuit of the Americas, the Grand Prix layout, which is basically the full layout. That's the same layout that F1 has used, right?
yeah, F1 and IndyCar. Apparently, people were surprised by this. It was, I'm not going to say huge news, but it was news, which I was surprised by because I kind of just figured they'd run that layout.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes the most sense. But I don't know. I'll give it a chance, see what the race is like, but I'm not really that optimistic. To me, just in my opinion, the like that S section, like at the sort of at the beginning half of the track, just seems to go on forever, and but there's not gonna be any passing through there. So it's just like this long section of nothing, and then you get one chance down to that heavy braking zone where it's kind of like a, I don't want to say a 90-degree turn, but a really sharp turn that gets you onto the long backstretch. That first beginning section seems so boring to me.
I mean, it's fun if you're in the car for the first three turns, like left, right, left. But then after you go back right, it's just too samey, and it's not great. I don't think I'll like it. I personally hate the track. I don't know why NASCAR is giving this a chance, but we'll see.
So I guess we can move on to the iRacing section of the news. We'll start with Austin with the Skidder Creek Racing League update on Saturday morning.
That was a pretty good race. We were at Barcelona, Catalunya. We raced the F1 track, so the Grand Prix circuit. Qualified second. I had pole for a lot of qualifying, but Justin Morton pit me at the end by like 6/100ths of a second or something. So it was pretty close. Um, on the green, I was trying to give him more room than I should have probably, and being too nice, and he just left me in the dust. And then you got by me, and I was having a battle with Tim for a bit. And then I messed up because they really changed the dirty air in iRacing over the last like week with the new patch. Because I was following you and I went to break going down the front stretch and I just missed it. Like it was bad. Then Tim got back by me, and then Tim got a slowdown, and so he just pulled over on the front stretch. And then I was trying to catch you, and then your race got like, I'm not going to say ruined, but it was like poorly affected by lap traffic. And then I caught you, and we had a battle for like a lap or two. And
Yeah, when when you were behind me, And when you missed that turn one, that totally caught me by surprise. I thought you were like nailing me. Um, I had no idea it was coming until you were like as big in your in my mirror as you were going to be. And that's when I saw you. I've had a mini heart attack.
Yeah, I was gonna choose to go off the track and lose a couple seconds than hit you. I don't know why. I even let off early and braked earlier than I normally would have, but the lack of downforce on the front end, you just lock up the brakes um, too quick and slide.
So yeah, that lap traffic situation. So we're at Barcelona, and it was that kind of long. I don't want to call it backstretch, but it kind of is.
Oh, it's
Um,
the backstretch after the fast right-hander at the top of the hill.
yes. So I caught up to the GT3 leader, and he was just behind one of the slower cars in our class, the GTE. And the GT3 guy moved to the left, and the GTE car was on the right. So I got to the point where I'm like, whatever, I'm gonna just send it through the middle. I'm gonna go to the right of the GT3 car, and I'm gonna pass to the left of the GTE car, going down into the next that hairpin turn. Well, then at the last second, that GTE car moves to the left, right across my nose. And in that time, like I'm watching him, I miss my braking point, and I fly through the corner. Totally got me out of rhythm. Um, I just I like lap traffic to be committed to whatever they're doing, whether they're going to be on the left or the right, whatever. I just want commitment. Um, those last second moves like that, they really mess you up. But I understand like that league's, it's really casual. It's all about learning, you know, and that's what these guys are doing is learning. So um, need a little bit of racecraft there, but that all comes with experience. So I mean, I'm not going to flip out about that.
Yeah, you really when you're racing around the lower classes like that, you really got to big dog it and just put your nose out there like I'm gonna pass you here whether you want me to or not because there's two races going on. I got a guy a second behind me and your closest competition is like 20 seconds in either direction. So don't mind if I do.
Right. Yeah, and I forgot to mention that I joined this league now. I am now in the SCRL. It was my first race. Luckily, it was a track that I've raced at once this year at Barcelona, and albeit in a different car. I decided to drive the thick boy, the BMW M8, and I had a lot of fun. I settled into second there, following Justin, and he was just a little bit faster than me, especially in that last chicane. And then uh, I made a mistake in the pit stop. I took a little bit too much fuel, so that put me behind and couldn't catch up to you or Tim through the last bit. And I was hoping Tim was going to battle with you. He was catching you, but not quite enough. Um, but that was a fun little series.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
So then we go to BRL, and we'll touch on the Friday night stuff a little bit first. Um, Friday night's Dirt Street Stocks. That's the only league I race in, or we both race in, I should say. And it's Evolution, which is arguably my favorite dirt track on iRacing. And I was disappointed in myself in qualifying. I just wasn't running the right line and got a really poor time, so I had to start near the back in my heat. Didn't transfer automatically to the feature because I didn't have track position in my heat. So I had to go to the consolation. We won that, and then started like would have been 10th in the feature. Made our way through the field, got up to we were battling for third and fourth, and right at the very end, I was behind J.R. Shepard, and I got into him, and I hate that happened. He was backing up the entry to turn one, and I was driving it a lot harder. It was just a different style that we were doing. Um, and I drove in just a little bit too hard and got into him, spun him into the inside wall. That was the last caution of the day, and Really, it put him from like third back to next to last or something like that. So I felt horrible about that. Um, but we ended up third. How did your experience go in that?
I'm just filling the field, I'm just showing up to participate, get my participation trophy and leave. Um, just a normal race. There was one point I think because Steven Spies was running up through the field. I think he got turned early in the race, and he was like dead last after the first caution, which came out like 5 laps into the race. So he was hauling up through the field, and they went like 4 wide on the front stretch. Of course, I'm hauling behind him, filling the field, back marker as you do. And I just see Todd, the 87 car, Todd Liston. He is like, probably 45 degrees the wrong direction coming up towards the wall. And I slam on the brake, but it's dirt, so you don't stop. And I nail Todd. Like, the front end of my car is destroyed. Finish the race, though, so not that bad. Todd's spoiler is gone. His rear fascia is also gone. Um, it was a pretty gnarly wreck.
Yeah, that wreck that took Steven out at the beginning. That was a pretty gnarly wreck too. That happened a few cars in front of me. Him and Chris Davis, they just got kind of hooked on each other in out of turn four, and they pushed up the wall, and I knew they weren't going to make it without hitting the wall, so I was like, oh boy. So I started moving low early, and they just clobbered the wall, man. Just they hit it so hard, and Steven goes flipping and stuff, and I had to kind of take evasive action to miss it, but that was a pretty wild wreck. Um,
I
and
slowed down. He went up in the air and like did a somersault or something. It was crazy.
yeah, they hit the wall so hard because the wall really straightens out there, and you're coming around the corner. The wall doesn't really blend; it just goes. It's just a straight wall, and boy, they hit it a lot. So, did you want to touch on the other series on Friday night? If so, I have no input because I wasn't there.
Nah, just filling the field. We
Nice.
can go Saturday.
So on Saturday, we were at Linear Raceplex on the pavement stuff, and we had three really good races. I thought overall, only a couple cautions in the first two races, and then none in the last race. Um, First race, street stocks. Um, I can't remember where exactly I started, but it was in the top eight, in the back part of the top eight. Um, Drove our way through the field, had some really tough battles, like with JR and Donnie and James. Um, and we were able to get through the field, and we passed James with like 10 laps to go, and then the caution came out right after that, and I ended up winning under caution. So that was kind of nice. We actually, I think we got a caution with like 10 to go, and then I think maybe we got another quick caution or something that ended the race. I can't remember exactly, but
I'm not sure. I know we had a caution at the beginning of the race. That was me and Bruce. We were racing up to the field. He got loose on down the backstretch, so I figured he was either going to spin out or go down to the bottom and have to gather his stuff up so he wouldn't be 3 wide. But we ended up being 3 wide, and I was like, probably not a bad idea, not a great idea. And then going down the front stretch, I was trying to leave Justin Morton on my outside enough room. Basically, like one car to a lane, because at Linear you have the dotted lines going down the front stretch. So I figured that would be enough. Um, and either Bruce got loose and came up into me, and he thought there'd be more room. His spotter might not have told him we were 3 wide either, because he just came up and we spun ourselves out.
yeah. So we had a caution on lap four. That was what you were talking about with Bruce, and then I took the lead on technically on lap 40, and the caution was on lap 39. So I like the lap that I took the lead, we had a caution. And then yeah, we had one more caution on lap 47, which ended the race. And JR was behind me, but I think I could have held him off regardless. But because I got a really good restart, and JR had to get past I think James first. But kind of a shame for James there. He led for a while, and yeah, he led for 38 laps, and I led for 11. So he led the majority of the race and had the fastest lap, but just didn't have the track position at the end. So, in Austin, you can start us off. We went to the SK mods for the second race.
Honestly, I remember more of the street stock race than I do the SK mods because in the street stocks, like I was 18th at lap like 4, and by lap 50, I was 8th. So yeah, I was passing a lot more people in the street stock race than the SKs. I think I only got passed in the SKs.
That's a good point. The your street stock race, you had a really good at recovery. You had your hood flew off because you had damage. You had to get it, didn't you? You took your fast repair, didn't you?
I had to.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, you did a phenomenal job getting back through the field and getting up to that pole spot for next week. So you'll start first at South Boston, which is a good place to start there, being how chaotic it can be.
Yeah, it's also the only track I've ever won on on asphalt in BRL.
Was that in the which series was that in?
Well, both the lower ones.
Oh, have you won in both cars there?
Yeah, both at South Boston and the SKs. It was a wreck fest, and the only reason I won is because I started on pole and James wasn't quite fast enough to pass me on the like 5 green flag laps we had. It was basically a caution fest when I won in the SKs. It's the night of Sebring.
There you go. So now
I raced,
you got a chance to get another one at South Boston.
and then in the street stocks, it was season 2, I think. I started third, and Kurt and Donnie were in first and second, and going into turns 1 and 2. On the first lap, I got past Donnie because I went on the apron, and then in 3 and 4, I figured I was faster than Kurt, so I went on the apron and passed him, and I felt kind of bad, but there's no yellow line rule, so.
So then,
And miraculously, we didn't have any cautions, so that's.
so at least James got the win in the SK mod race. He led 48 out of the 100 laps. Brian Dean started first, and he was doing a really good job defending. But just eventually, like James was working on him, working on him. Eventually, he finally got underneath him, and then we kind of freight trained Brian. Um, but you know, James did a really nice job too defending from JR, and then me. I ended up third. Started fifth. Just like you said, not a whole lot of passing in that race. Justin Morton went from 12th to 4th. Donnie Moore went from 11th to 5th. Other than that, there wasn't that much passing going on. James also got the fastest lap time as well in that one, but um,
Yeah, there weren't that many wrecks either. It was basically if you started on the inside, you were in pretty good shape to do well. But thankfully there were the long green flag runs, so if you were fast, you could make some spots up.
yeah, we had a caution on lap 20 and then a caution on lap 98, which ended the race. Which I I'm not sure JR was going to be able to get around James anyways, but um, yeah, I'm sure that was kind of a saved by the bell kind of thing for James. But then we move on to the Grand National race. Where did you end up finishing in the SK race, by the way, real quick?
Honestly, no clue, bud. Maybe seventh, I'm
Seventh.
not sure.
Yeah, you got seventh, so you'll start on the front row next to Brian in the SKs at South Boston. And the High Line's actually pretty decent there, so who knows?
I will die for Brian.
It's very noble of you. So we go to the Grand National Series race, um,
We
and that,
both started in the high line.
yep,
And if you're starting on the high line at Lanier, you have to hope that the person to your inside or one row behind you on the inside gets a piss poor start or restart so that you can get down because otherwise you're getting freight trained.
so I started sixth and you started 10th, both on the High Line, and I got freight train back to like eighth right away before I settled in. And then I just started kind of making my way through the field slowly. Um, and I saw up front, Mike Holloway was the leader. He led 11 laps. Then he got passed by Brian. And Brian, he led one lap, and then right after that, I think he just he hit the wall coming out of like turn two, and then he ended up missing the next corner, and he got freight trained, and just I think he might have had damage in his car or something, and he ended up pulling off the race. So that stunk to see that, because he had a really good start to the race. But then it was James leading, followed by Justin Morton at the time, then JR, then me. And we ended up getting past Justin, so it was James, JR, and myself. And we were battling it out for a long time. I was following him, trying to save my stuff. Then finally, I was like, I gotta go. Try to make some moves, move around. Um, I ended up accidentally getting into him twice through the whole race. But then the last time I did, I guess he spun his tires on exiting that corner after I just nudged him just a bit. I didn't visually see it, but it must have happened. Because then he must have had hot tires, and he missed the next corner. He slid up, nearly wrecked. Thankfully, he didn't. And I got around him, got into second, and I just flew up to James, who got caught up by lap traffic. Passed him with like 11 laps to go, and then I led the last 11 to secure a victory, which is really important for me in the championship, so we extended our points lead. That was a really, really intense race, and I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun because it was green flag the whole time, and the SKs pretty much were too. So it was really nice to kind of get a feel for the new tire model. That right rear falls away pretty quick, so it makes it a lot more fun.
I love the green flag races because you get to see how the race is going to develop. So you see comers and goers. I like that.
Well, it also gives you a chance too, like if you're really unlucky. Like personally, if you want to be on the inside on the restarts, I'll be on the outside. So it at least gives people like me a chance to kind of make the positions back.
So and you also end up finishing seventh again. So you got eighth, seventh, seventh. So you'll start on the front row in every race next week.
Yeah, pretty weird.
I think you had the pace. You definitely had the pace to get, I'd say, at least sixth. But you started 10th, had to make up some
Uh,
spots.
the way
So
they were, well, I mean, I got shuffled back to 12th
right.
by like lap 20 or something. And I was there until lap 33, and I was behind Lowell. And I looked down, and I was like, man, a third of the race is already over. Like, if I'm going to get going, I need to stop saving my tires as much as I am and start passing people. So I did. And it was pretty easy to make up time, um, whether that's tires or what. But I feel like I could have finished fourth, but there's a certain way to drive around that track where if you drive it just right, kind of arc it up high and then cut down low to get off the corner, it's impossible to make a pass um, like really really clean, which is how we try to do it on BRL.
Yep. Yeah, we had three really good races this week. Real quick, just want to touch on NEP, and then we'll bring our guest in. Because I actually want to ask our guest about the new iRacing content, if you don't mind, what he thinks about it. Um, and we can all analyze that. But NEP this week, the Grand Nationals, we were actually at South Boston this week. So I got a little bit of practice with that. And it was a total wreck fest. I actually took tires and like about midway through the 75 lap race, and I made my way through the field. I ended up getting fourth, but I just didn't have time to make up any spots because there's a parking lot in front of me. It was hard to make moves, and then people would wreck, and we'd have to re-rack them and do it all over again. But South Boston's tough for people. It's a really tight track. You can't hide anywhere, and when people wreck, the wrecks are usually big. Um, Actually, you can maybe prelude the iRacing update content while I bring our guest in.
All right, I can do that. So one of the first things we got was the new Delara F1 car. It's a fictional car, um, and that's pretty cool. It's a real race car though, actually designed by Delara themselves. So that was cool. It should be really raceable in traffic too.
So, this is where we wanted to bring our guest in this week. Our guest does not drive a real race car, but he definitely plays a role at a real racetrack. So we brought in Jennerstown Speedway's own Matt Shinoski. How are you doing, Matt?
Pretty good, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
Doing fine. I actually wanted to bring you in to first ask you about your opinions on the new iRacing content because it was a really big update this week with, oh gosh, we got Big Block Dirt Modified, Cedar Lake Speedway, the formerly known as Coca-Cola Speedway, Super Speedway, um, the IRO1 that Austin preluded to. Is there any one piece of content that really sticks out to you?
Uh, I don't know if there's one piece of content that really sticks out. Probably Long Beach, because that's such a. I imagine it was such a huge project for them and something that the community has wanted for a long time. But something that I thought about this build is we got more in this build than we used to get in an entire year uh, from iRacing. So they've just been stepping it up so much. They've been expanding and giving us more and more content with every build. So it's exciting. It's something that we talk about almost constantly. What are we getting next? What are we getting next? So it's great.
Yeah, that Long Beach was pretty much the definition of hashtag soon for for however long since it was scanned.
Yeah, I think it's soon was like ended up being 12 years, but I don't know. They said for a long time they weren't going to finish it, and then they did. So I'm glad they did.
That is the official getting around to a moment for this podcast.
Yes, I don't think there's one little piece of content that uh, I favor over everything else, but I think one car that I might use more than the other stuff is that Lamborghini Huracan GT3 car. I wouldn't mind trying that in like an endurance race or something like that. That might be a fun car to use because all the other GT3 cars, at least until the BMW comes out, are kind of they're kind of out of date. So now we got something that's new and current. It'll be interesting to try that car out.
I mean, to be honest, like the Mercedes and the Audi haven't changed much. Like they look largely the same. Like you could do like a fascia update on the front and rear of the Mercedes and it'd be current. And for the Audi, I really couldn't tell you what's changed.
Yeah, I think it just looks very slightly different now.
I have heard that some of the setups in this new build have really affected that Audi. There was one guy in our Skidder Creek League that was really messed up with the new setups. The car was like undrivable, so I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, that's oughta be cool if we could get rid of the Audi and put the Lamborghini in its place.
The Audi definitely seems to struggle more than the other cars in the GT3 class for sure.
Like if you didn't drive the Mercedes, you were driving the Audi, but it was track dependent, and it's also season dependent too.
So I'll throw it over to Austin and we can start asking our guest Matt about kind of his origins, both in the real racing and the virtual racing side of things.
Yeah, Matt, what got you into racing, and what was the kind of racing that you were watching at the time where you really got into it?
Well, when I was a little kid, probably 4 or 5 years old, just I remember having the Daytona 500 on the television and getting into it. And by the time I was uh, 6 or 7, I was really into it, wanting to watch the races every week. And at first it was tough because we didn't have we lived in a rural area and we couldn't get cable, so didn't get to watch all the races. But eventually we were able to get cable, and from there I was just a fanatic watching all the the cup races, the bush races, ASA, what anything that was on television. I was all about it. Uh, Probably until the age of 16 when I got my driver's license.
Yeah, that's interesting the whole not having cable thing because when I was growing up, it was kind of the same way. Like we would have basic cable, but that kind of you'd see the big races, but that was about it. So up until I was probably like, I don't know, 10 to 15, we didn't really get to see everything. And then finally in like 2009, I think, is when we upgraded to get speed channels, and that just opened up a whole new horizon for me to be able to watch, races every
Oh,
single week.
yeah. Qualifying, practice, the first practice, the happy hour practice is incredible.
Yeah.
That was something that they did like back in the 90s. That was different. Like they would do it for like the Brickyard 400. They would show qualifying. It's like, wow, I've never seen this before. You know. Then once Speed Channel came along and that new in the 2000s, whenever Fox took over and everything, they started televising everything. So
Yeah.
it just took it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, like I remember when I was a little kid, they were still playing the truck races on like ESPN, so I would be able to watch some of them. And that's actually one of my first memories is in 2000 when Jeff Bodine had that just horrible crash at Daytona. That's one of the first things that I can actually vividly remember seeing. And then 2003, I think, is when they switched to speed, and I didn't get to watch any more truck races until, like I said, 2009. So it kind of closed the door on that series to me for a long time, but um, that'll always stick in my brain as one of my first racing memories. Is that in 2000?
That's a heck of a memory. That was a amazing crash.
Is there like a one specific like moment in racing that you think of as one of your first memories? Is like I remember watching that.
I vaguely remember seeing Richard Petty's crash during the 1988 Daytona 500, where he flipped over and over and over.
My dad's told me stories about that. He never really watched NASCAR that much when before I came along, but he did say he remembered watching that. That had to be horrific for all the fans because I mean it's Richard Petty. I mean not to say that a wreck like that to anybody isn't horrible because it would be, but uh, when it's the king of the sport, who everybody basically thinks is invincible, going through something like that, it's got to be a true shock to the whole sport.
Matt, who's your favorite driver? Probably Dale Earnhardt.
Yeah, whenever I started getting into it really big, like in 1990, Dale Earnhardt was my guy from day one. I don't know why, probably because he was winning a lot, but he was my guy all the way up until the day he passed away.
Car looked pretty cool too. I have to imagine that might have factored in a bit.
Yeah, I mean the black car, it looked cool. Um, it was easy being an Earnhardt fan at first because he's winning championships and races. Towards the late '90s, it got a little tougher because his performance dropped off, and but yep, that was my guy.
Did you ever have a like a favorite in any other series, whether it be like Bush or Truck or ASA or any other like driver that stood out to you?
I had like several favorites, but nothing. Not like a one favorite. I would have maybe two or three drivers that I'd like to see. Basically, just root for the underdog type of deal. But nothing real big that I like owned a T-shirt or anything.
Yeah, I always enjoy the underdog stories.
So you're watching races in the '90s and stuff, and you get into racing, like you said, until you turn 16, and then focuses shift. Um, what was your first car?
Uh, well, my first car was an Oldsmobile Cutlass, but I unfortunately crashed that. I pulled out in front of someone. I didn't see him coming, so that was my fault. That was my lack of awareness. But then I got a 1990 Ford Ranger, and I drove that for all throughout my high school years, and uh, That was a good little truck. It had zero power. It had like the tiniest engine that Ford made, and it was so slow, which was great for a 16-year-old. That's what you need. But I loved that truck.
Do you remember what year that Cutlass was?
The Cutlass was like a '92 or something. It was a big car.
Oh yeah.
Boat territory. So it, Kenny mentioned you work at Jennerstown. What do you do at Jennerstown?
Well, I am the social media director for Jennerstown Speedway. Um, I handle all their social media accounts, which right now is just Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Uh, I do, you know, art and graphics for doing social media posts during the week, as well as on race days. I'm there posting live updates and posting the winners and victory lane photos for the fans. Uh, it's uh, it's definitely a not a full time job, but it's a solid part time job.
That's got to be one of the, like, if you're a hardcore race fan as you are, that's got to be in a way kind of a dream job because you're it's your way to be connected with the sport very closely. I mean, you get to be up close and personal with the drivers, with the crews, the cars. You get to set foot on the track every single week. Um, what's that kind of like? What are your emotions like every single week when you're just kind of there, kind of taking it in, and but also doing your job?
It is cool because, like, you get to approach, be friends with a lot of the drivers and stuff like that, at least acquaintances. But uh, definitely, I get excited for like our bigger events when touring series come in, like the NASCAR Wheel and Modified Series and the Cars Tour. You get to meet different people, uh, meet some people who are actually kind of like important in the industry. So that's exciting. Uh, Before I got into this, I used to work on race cars, so I'm used to being at the track. But seeing this side of it is a whole new world, and really opened up my eyes to something different.
So yeah, let's talk about that. Like, you're the social media guy at Jennerstown now. How did that opportunity come about?
Well, in what was that, 2017? Uh, I had been working on several different race teams. I didn't, when I was at the point where I really wasn't helping anyone out. I didn't know any race teams that I could help out. So I noticed that several dirt tracks in our area, namely Lernerville, they get a lot more attention from uh, the digital media. Might have three or four different sources of online, people writing articles, posting photos, social media updates, Twitter. And I thought, Jennerstown isn't getting any of that. And you know, growing up there and spending a lot of time there, I like my asphalt racing. I like dirt too, but I felt there was really something missing there. So I started my own social media account. I called it Western PA Asphalt. And I just started going to the track every week and uh, posting on Facebook and Twitter, the winners and stuff like that, giving them some media attention. And it caught the eye of the Speedway owners and general manager, who invited me to work for the track. So that's how that started.
That's actually a really cool story. I don't want to say like a Cinderella story, but it's like probably not something. I'd assume not something you really expected to get that kind of attention, but nicely done on your part. Shows you deserve it when if they were able to if it caught their attention as much as it did.
Yeah, the little man that could.
I still don't know what I'm doing. I didn't know what I was doing back then. I still don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. I don't have any training on like media or anything like that. But I'm just kind of winging it, seeing what other tracks do, and trying to copy the ideas that I like.
Well,
You mean to
sometimes,
tell me you're not even degreed in
Nope.
this profession?
well, sometimes that's almost the best because you're learning by experience, and I think there's no more valuable knowledge than from experience.
Well, the people at Jennerstown, uh, the owners and the general manager Billy, they give me pretty much all the freedom I want to do whatever I want. So it's that makes it fun and exciting every week.
And I'd say, the past like year or two, at least from my perspective, since I'm here in Michigan, and the only really knowledge that I get from Jennerstown is either from watching your stuff or kind of watching the broadcasts that Jennerstown will do occasionally. But it seems like Jennerstown's been kind of on the up and up. There's been different series coming in. They've all seemed to really love the track. It seems to be kind of gaining some popularity over the past couple of years.
Well, that's true. I mean, the track's been around since the 1920s actually, and it was paved in 87, 86 or 87, and they at that time throughout the late 80s, 90s they hosted Bush North ASA. They were kind of big on TV a lot, and but they closed after the 2008 season, and it sat dormant for about 5 years. So that really killed the momentum. So they've been slowly bringing it back, and they've done it right. They've kind of just slowly, instead of just diving in and trying to do too much, they've slowly brought it back, and they've kind of gained the trust of the racers and the fans in the area that they're going to remain open. And it's just been a slow process, but they've been just like you said, they've been getting bigger and bigger every year, and now they're bringing in bigger and bigger events, and it's garnering a lot of attention, which is exciting.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing what's in store for the next year or two. Um, hopefully, hopefully with this pandemic and everything, we can all get past that and get back to normal, and we can start really pushing the limits for every track as far as capacities and what they can do. Everybody's so limited right now.
Well, that's true. I just read this morning how the first trucks with the vaccine are arriving. So hopefully that works out, and the vaccine is good and it works. I mean, I trust the FDA, but I hopefully we can get see the light at the end of the tunnel here and get back to normal life.
Yes, sir. Well, I want to transition from real racing into iRacing. Um, so you're in a group, which I'm also in the group, and we newly signed Austin Belkey to the group. Western PA, Western Pennsylvania iRacing. Um, start talk about like the origins of that and kind of how that group or team kind of works.
Sure. I joined iRacing in the fall of 2014 after the real racing season ended. I was working on a race team then, and I don't know. I just decided I want to. I'm like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to actually buy a wheel and pedals. First time I ever had that, and I got into it and was loving it. It was addicted, of course, and I have also been racing RC cars for about 15 years at that point. And one of the guys I knew from racing RC cars was Chris Wolfson, and from the area here, and ran into him at an RC track. He's like, "Oh yeah, I do that too. So does my brother." I'm like, "Oh, well, we need to get together." Yeah, okay. And that not long after that, the iRacing had their very first. They came out with team racing, and they had their very first 24 hours of Daytona. And after seeing how popular it was, I contacted Chris. I'm like, they got a 12 hours of Sebring coming up. We need to do that. And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. He says, my brother's into it too. He wants to do it. So we got together and we chose the BMW Z4 and we ran the 12 hours of Sebring. And we were addicted to the team racing. We did the 3 hour races on the weekends every weekend. We raced a lot that first 12 months or so that we existed. We raced a lot, but it was a blast, and it just expanded from there. My brother got into it, and then we decided when we wanted to run Daytona 24 hours, we're like, well, we got to add a couple more members. So we added that first one. We added Ron Henry and Lowell Jewell, and it's been it was a blast. We just kept doing it, and it's been expanding from there.
Can you tell us about how you got involved in BRL and what it was like in the early years?
Sure, that wasn't long after I started iRacing. I had no idea about leagues or anything, but I saw in the hosted race, it was a Saturday night. It was a holiday weekend, Thanksgiving weekend. And I noticed in the hosted races there was super late malls at Martinsville. So I'm like, sweet, that looks awesome. Clicked on it, started racing. Didn't look at the title of the race or anything. Had no idea what I was in. It was just like a probably like a 50 lap race or something. I don't remember. Um, so I ran the race and it was okay. And the next morning, I had a message in my inbox on iRacing saying, "Hey, come join. Hey, good racing last night. Here's information to our league if you want to join it." I'm like, "Oh wow!" So I did, and I was in bootleg for. I still am, but that was what just December of 2014.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the longest tenured members that's still, if in any way, affiliated uh, with BRO.
That is correct. There's only a couple that have been around who predated me.
That's,
And who predated you and are still around too.
Yes, yes.
and then you. So was it you, and then your brother, and then the Wolfsons? They kind of
Pretty
follow
much.
you.
Yeah, yeah. I told them about this league I was in, and they had the interest to join. So yeah, my brother Tim joined, and Chris and Ben Wolfson, and then it's great because people we've met through that league have ended up being on Western PAI Racing, our endurance team, uh, and it's been great because we only want people that on the team that like we know and can have a good time with. That's the main criteria for being on Western PAI Racing.
I can second that because, um, when I joined BRL, I hardly had any friends in iRacing because it was just through I had started streaming kind of on and off, and one of my viewers said, "Hey, I'm in this bootleg racing league. You should try it out." And so I did, and that league has helped me meet a lot of really cool people. And when you're in there racing for a few hours and everybody's just kind of casual about it, you actually get to chat and kind of get to know people if you choose to. And um, there's been a lot of cool people that have come through that league.
Yeah, and we're chatting like during the race, some under cautions between the races. Sometimes we'll hang around and then team speak after the race and talk.
Yeah, the great thing about that league is that it's pretty laid back. So you end up becoming, iRacing friends with many of the people you race against.
Especially on Friday nights when we're doing the later dirt leagues and there's I mean probably less than 15 of us, so it's more casual and personable. And we talk about some dumb stuff, but it's always a good time.
It is kind of interesting to think about that. All these people that I've met and I consider my friends, I've actually never met before.
I've had that when me and the Wolfson brothers decided to go to the IndyCar race at Mid Ohio. I had to pick up Ben, and then we were going to drive to Chris's, and he was going to take us out there. And I went. He gave me the address to his house. I went there. He got in. He's like, "Hey man, what's up?" We had never seen each other in our lives, but it's just like, "Hey, what's up?" Like because we had spent so much time online talking to each other, we knew each other. There was no need for introductions. It was as if we'd known each other for years.
That is so crazy. Just walk out like hop in the passenger seat, like, hey, how's it going?
I don't think we shook hands or anything like introduce. It's like, hey, what's up? All right, let's go. You know.
Gee, I feel kind of bad now. I'm in Ohio. We shook hands. It's not very personable.
Oh, don't tell them we shook hands during the COVID era. Jeez.
Oh
You can
boy.
use hand sanitizer, or use use the UV rays of the sun god to cleanse the COVID.
Yep, you sanitize before and after. Both hands. Transitioning from that, one thing, iRacing obviously is meant mostly for the racing, but um, you have really taken a liking to the painting side of it, which that's a very important side of it too, because I mean, there's some really sweet looking paint schemes and everybody wants to look cool, and you found a way to really make that happen for a lot of different people, including myself. If you look at the slideshow, just about all those cars were painted by Matt. Um, how did you kind of get into the painting side of it? Was that something you were interested in before iRacing came along?
It's always something I've been interested in. When I was a little kid watching those races, I was drawing pictures of cars on just paper with markers and crayons and stuff. Uh, when the first real NASCAR game count was the original NASCAR racing by Papyrus. It came out like 94, 95. Um, I would go over to my buddy's house because he had it, and my computer wouldn't run it at the time. But I spent a lot of time over at this friend's house, and we would spend hours and hours playing the game, and we would actually paint the cars in the game because we decided, well, we need because it came with like the cup cars, like, well, we need the Bush cars, and there wasn't no internet. We couldn't download someone else's paint. We had to use our imaginations and make them from memory. We made those. We made the trucks, even though they were still on car bodies. We made all the trucks. So when I got uh, when I got the games, I made all of the cars that were missing, the ones that weren't included, the back markers, and that continued on into like NASCAR 2003. Uh, Started using Photoshop for that after I took a class at the community college for Photoshop. Started painting cars for NASCAR 2003 using that. So when I got iRacing, as soon as I found out you could customize cars like that, I was all about it. I was painting a bunch of cars.
That's awesome being really self-taught because I know you still do it today, paint a lot of the Bush cars for the NAP league that you guys run. Um, how'd you get started in the NAP league?
So the NEP League was started by two guys, Zane and Corey. They're both late model drivers, but one's from here in Pennsylvania and one's from Connecticut. Uh, and they got to be friends just by talking about racing online. Uh, Corey comes down here once a year to race at Jennerstown. Uh, but yeah, I've been friends with Zane and his family for a few years now. And when they started this league, I got an invite and been there uh, of the Bush North series since day one.
One of the most interesting things about that is how you guys run all those Bush North schemes. So, what's the most what kind of, I guess, like draws your attention to the smaller leagues or the lesser known people?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Um, I'm I'm looking for a league that's laid back. It's not too serious, not too cutthroat, where uh everyone's mad at the end of the race. Ones where you can like make jokes and just has that laid back atmosphere. That's mainly what I'm looking for out of an iRacing league.
And that the Bush North series, is that a series that you followed in real life back in the day when it was kind of in its heyday?
As much as I could. In the 90s, they would televise maybe 2 races a year, like, if they would race at New Hampshire and Watkins Glen, plus they came to our local track at Jennerstown, so when I was a kid, I did follow it, uh, as much as I could, but if it wasn't on television, you really didn't hear about it. I didn't, uh, subscribe to any of, like, the regional racing magazines or anything that I subscribed to, like, national racing magazines, but they really didn't cover that regional stuff. But, yeah, I followed as much as I could.
That's kind of weird for probably Austin and I to think about the whole magazine subscription that you'd have to do to to follow something like that with the internet not being very prominent at the time and just the coverage just not quite being there.
Yeah, I think the closest I got to that was maybe like the peak of NASCAR's popularity in like '06 or '07. I think my family was like picking me up NASCAR magazines because you'd look in them and they probably came out like once a month or maybe once a week or something. And you could look at like the last three races. So maybe once a month, but it showed like a graph of where everyone, maybe like four or five people in the race were at different laps. So you could follow their position counter and it would talk about like the differences between like the short track cars and the super speedway cars, the way the front end was or the radio bubble on top of the roof, the antenna.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was subscribed to Stock Car Racing Magazine and Racing for Kids Magazine.
I did
That was the
have
main source of information.
I think it was called ESPN for kids when I was probably about 10 years old or so.
Nice.
But
I know like CVS would always have the pole position magazines whenever MIS or NASCAR came to MIS, so it was like the home state. Um, and you could pick those up.
speaking of MIS, that's a track that Matt has been at in real life. Um, what what tracks have you been to in real life as a spectator?
Oh boy, I had a list a long time ago. I haven't really been to many NASCAR races. I've never actually been to a cup race. Uh, Me and when we were kids, our parents would take us uh, to like some tracks, and it would be we went on Friday for like pole qualifying and practice. So we did that twice in at Michigan in like '94 and '96. And let's see, as far as seeing cars on the track, boy, I can't remember anything else other than that. Uh, when we went to visit the race shops was the first time our parents took us down to see that. It was like '95. And we visited, the tracks around there like Charlotte, North Wilkesboro. Uh, of course, they were empty. Um, I think we did see like a Tuesday Night Legends car and stuff racing at Charlotte, but I've visited Pocono when it was empty. But that's about it as far as like big time NASCAR tracks. I've been to a bunch of short tracks.
Now you have been to like Mid Ohio for some different races. Any is that the only road course you've gone to?
Yes, I forgot about that. I have been to a couple of the Xfinity races at Mid Ohio. Yes.
That's
I'm
one
sorry. What
thing.
was the question? You had a question at the end of that. I'm sorry.
Oh, I did ask if there was any other road courses that you would have been to.
No, but I'd love to go two that are on the bucket list. I'd love to go to Road America and Watkins Glen. Those seem And I'd love to go someday to like the 24 hours of Daytona and the 12 hours of Sebring. Those seem like really great, like party atmosphere type events.
It was actually going to be one of the next questions was what would be a bucket list race to attend, but you already answered it.
Yeah, for me, it's those two. I'd rather go to those type of races than a NASCAR race at this point in my life.
Is that because of like more of an interest in the sport of sports car and road racing right now, just because of the way the state of the sport, or is there something else?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when I was growing up, it was just NASCAR. So my fandom in road racing is still kind of new, and I wanted to know more and more about it. With what I feel about NASCAR is like, man, I've been watching this stuff for 30 years, and every week for 30 years, and it's like, man, I feel like I've seen just about everything that can be seen on television. But
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a the road racing side. I definitely know a lot less about too than the stock cars.
yeah, for me, it's just more exciting at this point. Uh, Plus, with I guess, just gradually been losing interest in big time NASCAR over the years, just probably with all the changes they've made with all the race structure and the points and the rules and everything else. Uh it's definitely a different sport than when I was growing up in as a kid in the 90s.
Now, are you as much affected by like, 'cause some people have lost interest in NASCAR because of like kind of the lack of personalities in the sport. You don't have the Dale Earnhardt, the Richard Petty, the Cale Yarborough. Those guys that their personalities really stuck out and made they had their own persona. Well, some people argue that that's kind of not present anymore. Is that something that factored in at all?
I feel like when I was growing up, it was the narrative was these are common men doing uncommon things. Dale Earnhardt used to be a mechanic, or and that was the story for a lot of those guys. They came up from nothing and made it to the big time because they were good at driving race cars. And that element is something that we don't have anymore. I feel like because everyone who's in NASCAR, you know, they've been grooming themselves for this since the age of 5. Starting in go karts and moving themselves up. I feel like that narrative of common men doing uncommon things uh, does not exist anymore. And that, for me, that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, that's actually some really good insight on that because Austin and I being younger, it's a little bit. I mean, we kind of lived in the tail end of that kind of era where those guys kind of started to retire. Like the Terry Labonte is a good example, um, but we didn't live through like the heyday of that era like you did. So that's a good insight.
Yeah, I think back in back in the 90s, not all the drivers lived in mansions. And it was definitely more of a regional sport. And another thing to touch on that uh, kind of is different today is there's a less variety of tracks. They've gotten rid of tracks that were unique and the short tracks that created all the excitement and built all a mile and a half, what we call the cookie cutter tracks. And so that, um, for me, that takes away some excitement out of NASCAR.
I assume the playoffs don't help either then.
No, I mean, I've gotten used to it. I've accepted the fact that NASCAR is just, you watch it for the entertainment factor. You don't watch it to because you're watching pure racing or a true champion of the sport. You take it for what it is. It's entertainment.
Yeah, it's more so just like a sham or in shambles of its former self.
It's just different. Um, Fortunately, if I want to watch something that's a little bit more pure, I still have that with IndyCar and Formula One and road racing. So, like IMSA. So, there's other forms of motorsports.
That's kind of the beauty of motorsport in general. A lot of different, if you're a fan of like a stick and ball sport, you're kind of limited. Every version of that sport is basically the same. You just have kind of different levels of it. Whereas with motorsport, it's a lot more broad, and there's a lot of things that run on four wheels.
Well, that's the great thing about motorsports. There's something for everybody.
We talked about bucket list tracks or races. Is there a like if you could race in real life in any form of motorsport, um, and this answer might have changed over time, but is there any particular car if you could be a professional race car driver, like what discipline would you pick?
Oh boy, I don't know. When I was growing up as a kid, just like most kids, I want to grow up. I want to be a race car driver. I want to drive. Uh, when I was 18, I started working on cars, race cars. I had the opportunity to work on asphalt late models and other cars. And through that, I had an opportunity to drive just a basic uh, four-cylinder old Honda. It was a four-cylinder division. I raced that once, and I also raced a mechanics race, which was in a larger car. But so I guess you can say I've raced twice, and it just didn't thrill me. I didn't get that rush that they all talk about, how it's like the biggest rush of your life. Didn't get it. Felt like I was playing a video game. It was fun, but I just didn't. It didn't give me that. It wasn't what I expected. So from then on, I never thought about driving. I'd really have no desire to drive a race car. Uh, I'm very happy doing what I am, just like being on the sidelines, being behind the scenes with the social media and everything like that.
But that being said, though, you do still very much enjoy racing and iRacing. I mean, would you pass down an opportunity to drive like the C8R at like Road Atlanta or something?
Oh, of course, I wouldn't pass up an opportunity. Yeah, sure, I'd love to drive anything, but as far as being a racer, I'm content just being a pretend racer on iRacing.
I understand what you mean. That's funny.
Do you have a favorite iRacing car right now?
Oh, right now, I don't know. I really like that LMP2. Um, it sticks to the track. It races in the endurance races, which is my favorite type of racing. So right now, the Delara P217, I would say, is probably my favorite.
Favorite track?
Le Mans.
That actually that surprises me just a little bit.
It surprises me more so than wanting to just stay on the sidelines instead of like if you could like be an all out like race car driver for a living. What's so special about Le Mans then?
Uh, I love the real 24 hours of Le Mans, and when we get to do it on here on iRacing, I'm all about it. I love it. I don't know what it is. I feel very immersed. I feel like uh it's hard to put into words, but that is the race I enjoy the most, probably. Daytona 24 hours is right up there. I also like the 12 hours of Sebring, but I don't know. I feel like I get the biggest thrill out of when we run the 24 hours of Le Mans on iRacing.
The way I put it sometimes is there's certain races that you you almost like mark it as a holiday. It's got its like own day. It's circled on the calendar. You plan for it, but it's like you set everything aside for this like event, which kind of makes it like a holiday. That's the certain races for some reason possess that atmosphere that make them kind of above the others.
That's absolutely right.
And well, in this year for iRacing, 24 Hours of Le Mans, it's probably going to be a little bit different this year because last few years we've been running that HPD for Western PA iRacing, and is that probably possibly going to be different this next coming year with that LMP2 being introduced?
Yeah, I imagine that there's a pretty darn good chance we'll be running that LMP2. Um, the top class cars are a blast to drive, but they're just so complicated with all that electronics and boost and everything. You have to have, I don't like that stuff that the energy recovery systems. You have to manage that. I just want to get in and drive the car, so I much prefer the LMP2 for that reason.
Yeah, it's like it's too video gamey when you have to deploy your boost and what state of charge it needs to be at certain corners and for different straightaways.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to just jump in and drive.
Yeah, it's too much to think about. I have a hard enough time keeping on the track as it is. I don't need to be thinking about when's the exact time to press the boost and for how long. That's too much.
They also don't sound fantastic either.
No, they're different.
They sound as if like a horse or a donkey is like on its last legs, and like you're just trying to squeeze that extra performance out of it down the straightaway, and it just seems really odd.
And I know one of them sounds kind of like a tractor.
Yeah, the I think it's
Audi.
the Audi. Yeah.
Was there any other questions you had, Austin?
No, I don't think so.
You could call that unreal. Um, well, actually, here's a question I just thought of. I know of a lot of the leagues that you've been in. You've been in BRL. I know you ran the Podium Esports Cars Tour with me this year. The Skidder Creek League. Is there any other leagues that you've run in the past that maybe Austin and haven't heard of?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was first starting out, I was trying to be like I wanted to get into the more elite leagues because when you first start iRacing, you find out that there's ones that are broadcast on YouTube. You're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. I got to get on that. And then eventually that loses its luster. But I know so I've been in kind of a couple like elite short track leagues and stuff and didn't do well. And, discovered at a early uh, stage in iRacing that I wasn't going to be a pro. You have to find your niche in iRacing, the thing that you really enjoy. But as in the early days of Western PA iRacing, we did a league that was put on. Uh, there used to be a league called the Neo Endurance League, and it was like the most prestigious in iRacing. Well, we weren't in that league. We were in like the development league. They ran like 3 or 4 hour races with GT3 and I forget the other. It was a multi-class race. I can't remember all the classes, but we ran the Mercedes, and it was pretty much big time. Everyone who was in that was like these professional teams that have, uh, their own setup people and websites and everything, and all these fancy liveries. We were in completely over our heads, but it was fun. But we decided not to do it anymore just because it's not really what we're. It was a lot of pressure. You had to be the absolute top of your game to even uh, keep up with the pace in that league, and it's just not what we're about. We decided we're just mainly in it to have fun.
Oh, that's interesting though. I don't think I remember hearing about that particular league. There is a point though, definitely where like iRacing starts to feel more like a job than a hobby or a game.
Yeah, sometimes you get really into it, and then you commit yourself to leagues and stuff. Next thing you know, you've overcommitted yourself, and you've become a little bit burnt out. So then you have to take a step back for a while. It's There's nothing wrong with that. It's just I've seen that happen with myself and a lot of other folks as well.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, the I do like that the seasons for a lot of leagues are, it's a revolving door, so there's nothing saying you have to, run next season. So you wait for a season to end, and you can be like, take a season off, and you come back, or you run another different league, and you know, all of our schedules are kind of always ever changing. You don't have to necessarily commit fully all the time to something, for years and years and years, like in the real racing world.
Yep, that's very true.
Well, Matt, it was great to have you on to chat with us. I appreciate you joining us this morning. Um, I look forward to hearing about your adventures at Jennerstown this year. You and Zane, which was our last week's guest. Um, yeah, we'll definitely be talking to you soon, and you're free to go. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate you guys having me on. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks, man.
See you,
See you
Matt.
later, buddy.
Thank you.
That was a that was actually a really good interview with Matt there. Learned a few things about him. It's interesting, and we really timed this right, I think, on the podcast with having a driver from his perspective, and then the next week having somebody who's not a driver in their perspective at the same racetrack, even both who work at Jennerstown. Just kind of seeing the sport from different eyes.
Yeah, it's always pretty cool getting other people's thoughts and perspectives about the same thing.
So we'll transition. We got a few other things to touch on with some video game chatter. Uh, Cyberpunk 2077 came out this week, or last week, if you want to call it. Um, and it's it's actually, in a way, there's a lot of people playing it, but um, it's been, in a way, kind of a failure because the consoles especially are buggier than hell. It's been rough. Um, textures not rendering, and uh, people going like inside of things, and missions not being completable, and it's been really rough. Which has been a disappointment because that game's been in development for like 10 years, is when it was first teased in 2010. So it's been kind of a shame because everybody's been so excited about this game, and um, they've been putting out patches to fix bugs, but it's still been pretty rough and nearly unplayable when you're actually playing in the city, um, because of the frame drops and everything. But hopefully that gets better. That's kind of my rant for this week, as well as the Cyberpunk is. That game has just been pretty much a total disaster um, since its release.
I mean, I've heard of a lot of the bugs and the glitches. It's not really my game, so I'm not gonna play it. But I certainly would like to see other people playing it, or their playthroughs, or what they, the decisions that they make.
Yeah, everybody's calling it Cyberbug 2077.
And it's not like it was planned to release this time like for the last several years. They pushed it back like twice this year, and they've been continuing to push it back further and further.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is people were getting frustrated because they kept giving these release dates and then pushing them back. And, everybody probably is thinking like, okay, well, if you're gonna push the date back, then that means the game theoretically, that means the game should theoretically be, better at least, have more fixes and stuff. And now they finally release it, and it's pretty terrible. So it's made a lot of people not happy as to, why they spent $60 on a game that doesn't really work.
And even, I mean, I heard of people buying this thing last year. Like they pre-ordered it last year, and they finally get their money's worth out of it, and it's not great.
Yes, yeah, the pre-order for Cyberpunk was out a long, long time ago. But I mean, the beauty at least about games now, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, is the good thing is you can download updates pretty often for games. There's continuously updates for games coming out all the time. The bad thing is because of that, game developers seem to take advantage of that, and they will release a game that's really not even finished. They'll take a game that doesn't even have an online element yet and release it, and just I call it a finished game, and they'll be like, we're gonna update it later, which is kind of BS because you're totally missing out on content. Whereas, in the past, like PlayStation 2 games and whatnot, that didn't if they didn't have an online element, one the disc is that's the game, that's the full thing. Um, and so it was, it would have its problems, but it would also be a complete game.
Yeah, I mean, you might have like 5 or 6 different bugs and stuff, but it wasn't like game breaking, and it wasn't all the time. It was pretty niche stuff that would trigger the bug or the glitch. But anymore, it's like your entire game is a glitch, and I'm required to download an update to this game that is as big as the game file is. So how much your game was bad?
Yeah, so hopefully with these updates, I heard there was one like a day or two ago, um, yesterday actually, I think, at least on Xbox. Hopefully, the quality of life can improve on Cyberpunk. I want to keep giving it a chance, but uh, it's just hard to stay patient with it when it's as bad as it's been. It's probably the buggiest game I've played in a long time.
So moving on from that, we'll go to the next rant. Coda, the Circuit of the Americas. I don't think many people like it. I certainly don't like it. I think it's bad. It's terrible. I hate it in F1. I hated it in Forza. Um, I haven't played it on iRacing because I'm not going to buy it if I hate the track. So,
Now that's I'd like to know your thoughts of like what makes you hate that track? Because I have my own thoughts about why I hate it too.
like it tries to make like give you a sense of flow, but like it doesn't do it as well as the old tracks where like you look at like Road Atlanta or Imola, and some of those different older tracks where like they have a natural flow to them just because that's how they made the track. Like back then we didn't think as much about it, and it was just sort of like, hey, here's a layout I have for a track. We're avoiding different things in nature by doing it this way, and it's actually a really fun track, and it's fun to drive and race on. Whereas you go to like Coda and Circuit of Circuit of the Americas, Yas Marina Circuit, they're all like the Tilka tracks, and they all have like a fast, flowy section, but it just seems really superficial. And then there's a bunch of like 90-degree corner turns, and there's too much of those, and big straightaways. Like you don't need a straightaway to be that long unless it's made for Formula One, in which case it's made for the current day Formula One, which, in my opinion, and I'll go on record saying this, is the worst car to race with other people because they're so aero dependent, and you literally have to open up the rear wing to even give people a chance to pass down a straightaway.
Yeah, I think the way that I like to put it with Coda is that it feels artificial, and so I'm pretty similar to you and your thinking is that a track like Watkins Glen was just built over the landscape. That's just how the landscape was. how with the elevation change and all that. And it's got a beautiful scenery. Coda has a pretty ugly scenery. It's a very modern track. I'll give it that. Um, but it's as if somebody was like, okay, we got this plot of land here. What are the elements on a track that everybody loves, and let's just try to throw those elements into one track and kind of put them all together. That's just the feeling I get. It's just kind of a conglomerate of somebody's thinking of like, yeah, this is what a track should look like if we were going to create one. Whereas I think it really should start at a really nice plot of land where you just kind of you make a road that goes in a loop basically is what a good road race should be.
Yeah, you have some obstacles you'd prefer to avoid because it'll be cheaper for the track, or it's just easier to go around a mountain instead of through it or over top of it, or clear some trees out or something, or maybe you're avoiding a creek or a pond or something. Different things like that. Like you look at like the street circuits we've had of recent, like Sochi. That's a really fun track. I enjoy it at least. Singapore is fun, um, but it seems like there's some street circuit aspects and it's superficial and it looks ugly. Paul Ricard is the same way in France. Ugly. There's nothing to look at, nothing to do.
Yeah, I think the good tracks it takes a little more than just the driving surface to make a good racetrack. It's outside of the track surface too.
I mean, you look at like, I don't know if you've driven the tech track that was Long Beach before it was released in its current state, but like there's a track there and you can race on it, and there's nothing to see but like some black lines with the lasers. The laser scanner picked up stuff. It's still a fun track to race, right? Um, so you need a fun track, and in the looking aspect, like does it need to have great scenery of like trees and a mountain in the background? No, not really. Um, but you look at what's around Coda, and it's just like colored concrete and like one building and a couple grandstands, and it's just not great.
Thing is too is I feel like there's so few places to pass to for how long the track is. You got what is a 3+ mile track, and you got turn one you can make a pass. You go through those S's, you really can't do anything. You can't pass until that next kind of hairpin turn that
Yeah,
gets
it's like a
down.
30-degree angle hairpin turn,
Yep.
and
So
then there's another one at the straightaway.
yeah, it's kind of stupid too. You have like kind of a hairpin straightaway, and then another hairpin, and then you have so really you have like four hairpins or nearly hairpins on the track. Turn one, and then those two, and then there's like one more near the end of the track
Yeah, the,
too.
the last turn is pretty much a hairpin.
Yeah, so it's like there might even be one before that too, and like because there's like a multi apex right hand turn.
Kinda, but you really can't make a pass and expect for it to work, just because you're still turning right after that. So I feel like you just get crossover.
Yeah, it just and like you said, the flow is just terrible. It just doesn't work. I mean, we there's been F1, there's been super bikes, there's been Australian V8 supercars went there,
IndyCar went there.
IndyCar went there. Now NASCAR's gonna go there. IMSA's been there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, IMSA went there for a year, and then they said, "Screw this, we're out. We'll go to Mid Ohio." Fantastic idea on their part.
Yep. So it just I don't know. I I don't like it, and I
Even
haven't heard of anybody who does like it.
World Endurance Championship went there when at like the peak of the Porsche versus Audi. Maybe it was Toyota battles. They had a good battle, but it was only because the cars enabled it with their boost and stuff. And to be honest, it was really only okay. It's just one of the only places they battled because look at the cars and all they have is downforce over the top of the car. There's not much going on underneath.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be tuning in for the NASCAR races here, but I don't have high expectations. I expect it to get pretty strung out and just kind of be blah.
Yeah, I mean I'll watch it because I try to watch every NASCAR race, but in the NASCAR video game, if I ever got it, or in iRacing, if they ever allow you to do a whole season with the AI and stuff, I'll definitely do that. But I'd either skip coda or I'd turn the difficulty down and just dick around the whole race.
Yeah, it's kind of like for a few years there when the new Call of Duty game would come out. You'd look at it and you'd be like, man, this is going to be terrible. But then you buy it anyways.
Pretty much that's how
Just,
NASCAR Heat has worked for the first 4 games. I haven't bought the 5th one because I don't see the need, but yeah, it's like, oh, this is gonna suck. But I'd take my $60.
well, I think, like with, I, I'm comparing it kind of to, like watching the races. Like even when I think the race is going to be terrible, at least in NASCAR, I still watch the whole thing. So
I
it's
mean,
like,
I don't want to miss it.
right, yeah, I mean, you don't want to take the chance that it's actually going to
Like,
be watchable.
if your friend is gonna do something stupid, like, look, I ain't trying to see this guy get hurt, but like, I'm gonna watch.
Right, and then like on the Call of Duty side of it, I mean, we would watch like preview gameplay, and we're like, man, I hate this. This is stupid. Why are they got jetpacks and why are they running on the walls?
Well,
And then fast.
Advanced Warfare was the best game.
Oh, that is a wholeheartedly unpopular opinion there.
I was great at that game.
I want boots on the ground, man. And
Yeah, boots are on the ground except for when you do a jetpack.
well, yeah, I don't want the exception. So we would watch these previews and be like, man, this is awful. And then fast forward a couple months and we're all playing it and we all own it. But we're like, man, this sucks. Don't know why we work that way, but you get just so accustomed to doing something, you kind of.
I mean, it's the newest game, and they're always generally fun, but they have their quirks and stuff, so they're fun. But like, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Maybe it's just because it's different, I guess. So, Austin, have you made any progress on your modeling endeavors?
I took 1 step forward and 2 steps back. We'll put it that way.
So there's more to get around to do.
Yeah, by a lot.
So what was your 1 step forward and 2 step back?
I decided to paint the body, but I used incompatible paints, so it looks pretty messed up.
Oof. That's the Corvette, right?
Yeah.
So what makes it incompatible?
I mean, I'm not a chemist, so I can't tell you, but I primed it, and then I went to paint it, but I just used rattle can paint, and it's like for metal, but it's also enamel, and not great. So I got like a bunch of orange peel, so I have to sand it, and like a lot, and then I
That's
can paint it again.
that's fantastic.
You hate to see it.
That is definitely the you hate to see it moment of the week. Although I kind of would like to see what that abomination looks like.
I will send you pictures. But I got some new models because I went to a hobby store yesterday, um, and this guy like I don't know if he buy, like he must buy old collections or like other stores that are going out of business because he just gets in like a ton of stock, and because he gets it for like pennies on the dollar, he'll sell it to you for like nickels or dimes on the dollar. Like he's gonna make a bit of money off of it, but for the most part, like you're saving a lot of money too. So I got like a 1991 Davy Allison, the Ford Thunderbird model. I don't know if that's still going to be Davey Ellison. It could be Alan Kawicki, the #7 Hooters car. I got a Terry Labonte, like a late '90s 5 car, and then despite the fact I haven't seen the movie yet, I got the Hardee's car from Days of Thunder, the '94 um, Lumina, and that's just going to be Jeff Gordon.
Yeah, the Underbird. Make sure it says Underbird on it if you
Oh,
do.
I will.
Yes.
I mean, it's not that hard. You just cut off 3 letters or 2 letters. Sorry.
That's actually yeah. Yeah, I couldn't think of anything for the getting around to it. Uh it's kind of just all the same for me
Well, I mean,
this
yeah,
week.
guys, Kenny cleared his calendar to play Cyberpunk, and now that it's just trash and buggy, he's what are you gonna do?
Yep. I mean, I might have to go back to Assassin's Creed Valhalla because I, haven't. I mean, I started that and there's just so much to do in that. I might just go back to that until Cyberpunk gets its shit together.
Yeah, it's better than twiddling your thumbs, you know.
Yes, sir. Well, anyways, I think we're gonna end it there. I really appreciate Matt for coming on board for the podcast this week. He was a really nice interview. That was interesting hearing things from his perspective at Jennerstown, and he's been a long time iRacer too. So it was interesting to hear his origins on the sim racing and real racing side of things. Thanks to Austin for being my co-host as always, and I'm Kenny Kibbe, the NG Kibbs, and good luck and Godspeed to you.